Color TV game. Before the Famicom, Nintendo learned how to be a hardware company by shipping bright orange plastic boxes into Japanese living rooms. Between 1977 and 1980, the Color TV game line delivered simple, hardwired play. No cartridges, no downloads, just Pong-style tennis, hockey, and quirky twists. The models came fast. Color TV Game 6, Color TV Game 15, Racing 112, Block Kuzushi, and the Computer TV Game. Each revision shaved costs, tightened manufacturing, and taught Nintendo how to design for durability and mass production. The hook wasn't power, it was price. These sets were cheap fun during Japan's late 70s TV game craze, and together they sold in the millions. No one would call the Color TV game glamorous. You got a couple of knobs, a handful of modes, and that was it. But this humble line proved Nintendo could build consumer electronics at scale and profit. The Famicom didn't appear out of nowhere. It stood on these orange boxes like a launchpad. Game & Watch. Before cartridges and clamshells, Nintendo learned pocket magic with Game & Watch. Starting in 1980, engineer Gunpei Yokoi turned low-power LCDs into palm-sized time wasters that doubled as, well, a clock. One unit, one game. Ball, parachute, octopus, Donkey Kong. Simple loops that begged for one more try. They were cheap, durable, and everywhere. For Donkey Kong, 1982, Yokoi's team introduced the cross-shaped D-pad, a precise, thumb-friendly solution that later defined the NES controller and basically every handheld after. The multi-screen layout, two stacked displays with a hinge, quietly wrote the blueprint the Nintendo DS would follow 2 decades later. Game & Watch games were brutally simple by today's standards, but that was the point. Instant feedback, rising tension, a score chasing your last best run. More than trinkets, they were Nintendo's first masterclass in cost, feel, and focus, the 3 pillars the company would ride into the Famicom era and beyond. Famicom/NES. Summer 1983 in Japan. A red and white plastic box lands in living rooms and quietly rewrites the rules. Nintendo calls it the family computer, Famicom for short. 2 hardwired pads, a crisp D-pad, cartridges that click with purpose. 2 years later, a gray, VCR-looking twin shows up in North America as the Nintendo Entertainment System. Then the games hit. Super Mario Bros. Turns side-scrolling into a language. The Legend of Zelda hides a battery and a golden world inside a cart. Metroid makes passwords feel like secret codes. The NES controller, simple cross, 2 buttons, start/select, becomes muscle memory for an entire generation. The NES had sold over 60 million units and reset expectations for what a home console could be. It wasn't just a comeback, it was a clean slate. From chipset to checkout line, Famicom NES taught the world that consistency is a superpower. Game Boy. In 1989, Nintendo shipped a gray brick with a pea-green screen and changed handheld gaming forever. No backlight, no color, 4 AA batteries, and somehow it felt unstoppable. The trick wasn't raw power, it was endurance. Where flashier rivals burned bright and died quick, Game Boy ran for dozens of hours, shrugged off backpacks, and survived schoolyard drops like a champ. Then Nintendo packed it with Tetris. Suddenly the system wasn't just for kids, it was in briefcases, on airplanes, hypnotizing anyone who touched it. Falling blocks turned the Game Boy into a cultural handshake. You got next? The design was pure focus, a crisp D-pad, 2 face buttons, instant boot, and cartridges that clicked with authority. The link cable quietly rewired social play. Head-to-head Tetris today, Pokémon trading tomorrow. Game Boy didn't win because it was the most advanced. It won because it fit life. Toss it in a bag, fire it up in a line, share a match during lunch. Simple, sturdy, everywhere. A handheld that made time feel shorter and commutes feel like levels. Super Nintendo. In 1990, Nintendo answered the 16-bit drums with the Super Famicom, a gray curve of plastic that landed in North America as the Super Nintendo a year later. It didn't shout specs, it showed tricks. Mode 7 spun racetracks and world maps like magic carpets. The color palette bloomed. Sprites stretched, rotated, and fake 3D long before polygons took over. The controller added shoulder buttons, a small hinge that changed action games forever. Dash on a trigger, items on a tap. Camera nudges years later traced back to this pad. Then came the software flex. Super Mario World stitched secrets into every corner. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past made two worlds feel like one puzzle. FX chips tucked into cartridges turned Star Fox into a low-poly thunderhead, while Donkey Kong Country made pre-rendered sprites look like clay come to life. RPGs, Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, Earthbound, gave the system a heartbeat you could save to memory. Nintendo also learned pacing. Fewer rushed sequels, more killer anchors with Capcom, Konami, and Square firing on all cylinders. By the time the 16-bit era closed, SNES felt timeless, not old. A console that didn't just keep up with the competition, it rewrote what 2D could do when you give artists a little hardware poetry. Virtual Boy. In 1995, Nintendo tried to sell the future of 3D with a headset that didn't go on your head. The Virtual Boy sat on a spindly stand. You leaned into the viewfinder and stared into a world of red and black wireframes. On paper, stereoscopic 3D sounded wild. In practice, it felt awkward. No portability, no backlight to fight glare, and that fixed stand meant hunching over a table like you were inspecting evidence. The tech was clever, but the experience never melted away. You always felt the device. The library didn't help. There were flashes of fun. Mario's Tennis, Wario Land, Tolero Boxer, but not enough to justify a pricey, niche machine that parents didn't understand and kids couldn't easily share. Rumors of headaches and eye strains spread faster than word-of-mouth praise, and store demos often showcased the clunkiest parts: the posture, the red tint, the novelty wearing off after 5 minutes. Within a year, Nintendo pulled the plug. Compared to the evergreen Game Boy sitting in the same aisles, the Virtual Boy looked like a detour, an expensive lesson about what makes future tech actually feel friendly. Still, the experiment mattered. It taught Nintendo that 3D only works when it disappears behind great games and comfortable design. Nintendo 64. Summer, 1996. Nintendo leaps from sprites to free-roam worlds with a boomerang-shaped pad and a brand new idea: the analog stick. Super Mario 64 turned movement into play itself. Tip, tilt, sprint, wall kick, and taught the camera to behave, most of the time. 4 controller ports made the living room the arena. Mario Kart 64 rubber-banded friendships. GoldenEye 007 invented console stealth shooter vibes after school. And Smash Brothers turned a controller into a crowd sport. But the magic had a cost: cartridges. They loaded fast, they were durable, but they also held far less than CDs and cost more to manufacture. That single choice pushed studios like Square towards Sony. The PlayStation feasted on sprawling RPGs, while N64 doubled down on instant, kinetic play. Nintendo fought back with clever add-ons. The Rumble Pack made feedback a language, and the Expansion Pack quietly unlocked sharper visuals and entire games like Majora's Mask and Perfect Dark. By the end of the decade, N64 felt like a paradox. Fewer games than its rival, but a library stacked with genre blueprints. If the SNES perfected 2D, N64 defined how 3D should feel.